pleasure to welcome to the stage Paul Adams, CEO of EverEdgeIP, to take us through that. So a big welcome, please, to Paul Adams. Thank you.
Okay. Well, it's the third session after lunch, so hopefully I'll say something interesting for you folks. Let's get straight into it. Who are we, very quickly? We are a specialist in intellectual property management and commercialization. We work with corporations, research institutions, service firms, innovators, and investors, and our goal is to help maximize the value of their intellectual property. Those are our service lines there. Clients across 3 continents, they include Fortune 100 companies and 3 of the 5 largest companies in New Zealand. And our difference is that we have world-leading expertise, people like Professor Henry Balanis of Yale University, the inventor of laparoscopic surgery, Edward Scott, winner of the Bayer Innovation Award last year. Multidisciplinary teams who spread right across from engineering through to finance, marketing, etc. We have a very hands-on practice. Half of our business is dedicated solely to licensing our own proprietary technologies to multinational companies. And finally, we're independent. We don't file patents or trademarks like a patent attorney does. We advise on how to commercialize intellectual property. But enough about us. Something about this guy. This guy has affected the lives of every single person in this room. His name was James Watts, and he developed in Scotland in 1769 the first reliable and efficient steam engine. And this was really the key to the entire industrial revolution. It provided power free from physical effort, wind or water, seasonal variability. The effect of that was to allow manufactories to be placed anywhere and operate year-round, which provided economies of scale, which in turn led to urbanization, specialization of labor, improved education, and social development. So in effect, technology absolutely drives human development. But one of the things I think we forget when we're talking about technology is that every single technology, every product or improvement to our lives, the chairs you're sitting on, this AV system, this room, etc., began its life as an idea in somebody's head. And in that sense, intellectual property is really the driver of human development. And IP, in the form of ideas, is even more important today. It accounts for $5.5 trillion worth of US economic activity. That's larger than the GDP of any other country. It is a substantial proportion now, a very large majority of the value of the S&P 500. And if for no other reason that it's important under the new IFRS rules, directors are responsible for valuing and achieving a reasonable return on investment on intellectual property assets. So if we're thinking about commercializing IP, which is what we're here all about really today, that is generating economic or strategic value from IP assets, one of the problems with that is that it's just not that easy. It's risky, as we've seen, it's expensive, and it takes a long time. They estimate that for every dollar you spend on R&D, $7 to $15 is required on commercialization. And the pharmaceutical industry is a classic case of this. We have an industry here which has roughly 11% annual compounding growth rate in revenue and a 15% annual compounding growth rate in IP commercialization costs. This is an industry which has serious problems if it doesn't change the way it commercializes its ideas. And one of the reasons for this is that we have increasing internal development costs. Things are just getting more and more expensive to develop. And at the same time, shorter product life cycles in the market, which means that we shift effectively from a situation of profits to ones of losses. So why is turning ideas into dollars so hard? One of the major factors behind that is how we are commercializing our ideas. In the past, we've had this approach which is only one way to access IP, I make it. There's only one way to deploy IP, that's inside of our products. And we have tended to file IP protection when we do purely for defensive reasons, i.e. you can't use it. And that means, in many ways, it encourages the vast majority of ideas that are never actually used. The great quote from Henry Chesbrough of Harvard University that IP is created internally, it's used internally, it's brandished only on occasion to ward off intruders, and external IP is suspect, unreliable, and to be avoided. Now, perhaps you might be thinking at this point, now, that's a pretty cynical approach to things, but Siemens estimated, for example, that 90% of all German patents are never commercialized. And this is coming from a firm that files 2,000 a year and owns 62,000 patents. Procter & Gamble in 2002 identified that 92% of its patents had no business value of any kind. Now, when I put up these comments, I generally see two reactions from the audience. The first is a knowing chuckle, and that they say, yeah, my patent attorney screwed me too. Or alternatively, there's this look of shock when they go, hell, how much IP do we actually have? And is it being used? And if so, how? And what's the return on investment in our IP protection and IP management? In other words, I think what we have today when we look at how IP managed is a very closed or old economy role. IP is regarded as, if it is being managed at all, it's a secondary role which is very much ancillary to the core business. It's middle management, it's very much legal, protect the company. My company, how do you access ideas? My company develops them. External ideas, again, suspect, unreliable. Unused ideas, mothball them. Economic return, it's a cost center. IP manager KPIs, file as many patents as possible. I kid you not. That was my KPI when I was the IP manager at Navman. File as many patents as possible. What's that going to do for your IP budget? And finally, who drives the process? The patent attorneys or the external counsel. And what this kind of approach to intellectual property is, it drives Ricardian growth, named after David Ricardo. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with Ricardian growth. It tends to be a growth caused by efficiency, process, and productive improvements. It's organic, it's incremental. It's some of the things that Brian was talking about earlier this morning. But we'll return to this slide because it's quite an important one. The thing is that globalization is forging a new economy out there. And this economy is going to profoundly alter how we create, how we access, and how we use ideas. And one of the reasons for this is the democratization of information. Information and communication is becoming available to anyone, anywhere. And to give you some anecdotes of this, a week's worth of New York Times contains more information than a person in 1800 would have been exposed to in their lifetime. There's 2.7 billion searches performed on Google every month. And you can see the growth in internet devices over this period. They estimate by 2010 there'll be 35 billion. That's 6 for every person on the planet. And this new economy is having a fundamental impact on our capacity to innovate, how we generate new ideas, and how we manage and commercialize IP. In other words, who innovates and where is changing. Economically, what we find is that large companies are shifting, that innovation is shifting to smaller companies. And we can see this also in terms of the number of patents that are being filed. And then secondly, geographically, it's opening up vast new talent pools in Brazil, Russia, India, and China. Think about it like this. The top 22% highest IQs in China, those people classified as gifted, highly gifted, or genius, exceeds the population of the United States. There are 2 billion people under 18 in developing economies, and the first shipment of $100 laptops, the one laptop per child program, began in 2007. So these are children who have never had access to the outside world will suddenly have the world at their fingertips. And what that means is that innovation is changing. It means that anyone, anywhere, of any size in the world, anywhere, can generate valuable intellectual property. And what's more, now, they can sell or buy it to anyone of any size, anywhere in the world. So we're transitioning to an innovation economy, and that's an economy characterized by the broad and efficient transfer of intellectual property between market participants. In other words, it's a weightless economy in which the trade in ideas is as fundamental in the trade in products derived from those ideas. Axioms of this economy, there are 3. Intellectual property is the highest value asset class because, as we saw, what makes everything else possible. But there's no inherent value in technology per se. The cure for cancer that lives under your bed for its entire life is of no value or benefit to anyone. And thirdly, the concept of the division of innovation of labour. This last one bears some talking about. Division of labour is a core economic principle that goes back to Plato and Petty, but that increased market size and efficiency leads to increased specialisation. And what the division of innovation of labour recognises is that different ingredients for business success, IP, R&D, production assets, distribution, etc., often lie in different hands. In other words, we have a situation developing today where party A develops an idea and party B takes that idea to market, i.e. upstream suppliers of ideas, innovators and